I'm Tony Clark, founder and CEO at NextWave Consulting, and I'm here with Tomo, founder and CEO of Muuto Consulting. And we're going to be having a conversation about navigating the new transformation environment. Welcome, Tomo.
Good to be here, Tony.
Thank you. So, just before we get into this, for the audience, just a little bit about NextWave, a little bit about Muuto. So, for my part, NextWave Consulting is a next generation consulting company. We take on projects for enterprise scale firms in financial services, and we help them with their strategy, their specialist transformation, and their solutioning. So really those are the three things that we're doing. We're working for some of the world's largest financial institutions and a few in the middle as well, and doing some really interesting things with data and automation and broader component technology stack.
So we're a transformation consultancy also, but rather than specializing in the digital space and in FS, we've actually got a much more generalist view. So we do big complex transformation and change programs with clients, looking at how they frame, architect, and then execute their big programs of change. And that would include some digital, but it's mainly around the organizational component and the process component as well. So we focus on acceleration towards a value outcome is the kind of focus that we.
So that transformation journey with a focus on the organization.
Correct. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, given that we're going to be talking about navigating the new transformation environment, perhaps we should start with what we think that new transformation environment is, perhaps. There are going to be folks out there who are in enterprise. There are going to be folks out there who are going to be in the services side of the sector. And certainly our observation over the last year, 18 months, has been that we do seem to be in a new phase. There has been the cost of living crisis, interest rates, dry up in M&A activity, the wars, a number of things contributing to great uncertainty and constraint in the sector. We see a transformation agenda that's coming back. So we see a focus around AI, we see a focus around solutioning, we see a focus about control and regulation in our part of the financial services sector, but perhaps with a new scrutiny, with tighter guide rails in the transformation environment, and it doesn't feel quite the way it did in that period post-pandemic when most firms were still investing very much in growth, efficiency, and in the control agenda. It feels like there is work to be done, but it's in a slightly different operating model, a slightly different environment. Does that resonate for you, Tommy?
Yeah, I think post-COVID, I think we saw a lot of people tightening and holding back on the change agenda because there was so much forced on them, so they reacted quite quickly. So we saw a big spike in client demand and work at that stage. And the types of transformation, I think it was quite nervous at that stage. There was a lot of kind of cost control, get ready for whatever the future looks like. I think there's been a bit of a slump or a reticence to invest since then over the last sort of 18 months. But I don't think firms, especially in this environment, can hold back for forever. So I'm seeing a little bit more of that coming through now. But I do think the approach to that kind of transformation is a bit more, a bit different from what it was. I think it's not, big throw it up in the air and see how it lands. It's much more specific, maybe targeted, maybe with more specialized focus and support in some of these types of work we're seeing at the moment.
Yeah, so a bit more considered and focused. Certainly from our standpoint, it's those initiatives that have a regulation, a tangible risk, or a clear business opportunity attached to the ones that are getting budget and not much else. But the good news is there's a bit more happening. So we'll see how this tracks from here. Transformation. So that's an overused word. So is digital, by the way. But what do we mean by transformation? Because I think that can mean different things to different people.
Yeah, I've kind of got to the point where it for me, it matters less now what the definition of transformation is. It's much more, what does it mean for that client at that point in time? I mean, traditionally, you would have said something that is fundamentally shifting how an organization operates in the future would have been transformational. But really, whatever a client or an organization is trying to do that's hard for them, you've got to start at the context of where they're at. So I think it's something that is multi-threaded, multifunctional, probably multinational. Most of the work that we see with our clients cuts across borders. So I think it's something that's a bit more ambitious than just the incremental.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. I think, and we've all seen small, discrete initiatives, I'd say more transactional pieces of work, and they may or may not be pulling towards a common goal, but there's a tipping point at which the business can actually measure. You've moved the needle for the business, and perhaps you've redefined, redesigned, redeployed at whole of functional, whole of business level, and you can say the new operation is different to where we started, and it'll vary firm by firm, but for me, that's really where you would say we've transformed the operation. It starts with vision and mission and level of ambition. And firms do this through their strategy setting process to think about what is that North Star for the business and what's the level of ambition. Do they want to be the biggest? Do they want to be the best? Do they want to be
I think
the most
right.
differentiated?
I think if you look at the book approach to it, you'd set out with all those, that sequential approach. I think a good chunk of the work that we do, we come in partway through somebody's transformation, and the first thing we are asked to do or volunteer to do is to kind of diagnose where the problems are and what's working. And quite often it's that stuff being missing. So I think it kind of, back to the kind of transformation definition, it kind of doesn't matter as long as there is a target end state or a target outcome that the organization is going for. If it's a 1-2 year journey, it's going to be different on the way, but they've kind of got to start with the end in mind. And quite often we don't see that. There's kind of a move to action, and it gets a bit messy. And actually it's putting that all back in a box, doing some prioritization, and actually reframing where they're trying to get to, I think is something we see quite regularly with clients.
Yeah, that single vision and mission is so important. And there are some stats out there that 50% of the top execs at most corporates don't know what the company's vision and mission is. However, that is the focal point and the pivot around which all of the transformation work and the strategic initiatives are going to hang. So important to get that clear. What do you want to be famous for? And then a strategy is really an actionable set of initiatives to overcome a set of core challenges to add value and get you to that endpoint. And if you can lay out your operating plan and your execution plan in that way as an actionable plan, so a strategy isn't a statement of intent or ambition, it's actually a set of initiatives to get you there. That's what organizations can plan to, can map to, and can deliver to. So I think it starts with that. And there's a point on the transformation journey where I think you can say, okay, we're reaching transformation milestone 1, 2, 3, and beyond, and it's possible to plan that in and to measure that progress.
I think maybe this is a shift in how organizations and probably functions are thinking about this as well these days. It used to be pan-enterprise transformation. There would be something fundamental at the organization level, but quite often the optimization is within a function or within a part of the organization itself. So you could have multiple transformations ongoing in parallel.
Yes.
With interdependencies. So I think it's almost pushed it down to a lower level of ownership in the organization, which I don't think is a bad thing.
Yeah.
But I think it also leads to more complexity, maybe more kind of sequencing challenges across an organization. So again, it's like, a finance transformation as part, of a bigger agenda is still a major thing for that finance organization, even if it's, less for the total organization.
Yeah, I'll come back to that one, but because we have an example in the NextWave portfolio. But Muuto, you work for some of the world's largest corporates, multi-sector. Example from your world?
Yeah, I think we've seen, I think over the last decade, maybe a lot of specialization, functionalization. What we're seeing at the moment around kind of operating model and organization design is a more integrated, a move to a more integrated organization. So we're seeing quite a lot of that in the operating model space at the moment in different sectors. I think also the geographic versus kind of business unit lens that kind of waxes and wanes depending on the unit. So we see all of that, and then obviously the consequences on the knock-ons of that around wider organizational technology process change as well, which needs to morph to address it, I think, or to accommodate it.
Yeah. And we're talking world's biggest pharmaceutical or energy companies in terms of tens of thousands of heads. It's this sort of scale. Is that where you guys play?
Yeah, I mean, most of our clients are multinationals. So we started in the organization design and implementation space, and then quite frankly branched out into what we call whole systems change. So yeah, most of our impacted populations and organizations would be 50 to 100,000 or even more in terms of headcount.
Yeah, for our part, NextWave has a client roster that includes some of the world's largest banks, but also mid-market firms in the insurance and the investment side of the sector. That example around finance transformation is quite a nice one for us, because that's what I would term sort of whole of function transformation. And if you took a finance department at a big bank, they may have hundreds, thousands of heads in the team across multiple locations, and they're running a whole plethora of processes. And if you actually sort of decompose the finance function into level 1, level 2 processes, you can break it down. And there's financial planning and analytics, there's stress testing, there's the accounts payables receivables process, there's the forecasting and MI, and so it goes. For us, transformation would be defined in terms of a broad set of KPIs that perhaps says this is a wholly manual department, right? And we want to get it to a 30-40% automated function. We want to be able to scale the banking business without scaling the headcount. We want to automate, we want to perhaps take overhead and cost out of the operation. So there's a point at which you would say we've transformed. And to get there, the roadmap would probably constitute multiple discrete deliveries and solutions that are all pulling towards that overall target state architecture. So for us, we'd be automating the collateral process, we'd be automating the analytics process, we'd be getting rid of the spreadsheets, getting rid of the PDFs and the SharePoints, putting things onto platform, and knitting all of those pieces together into a single blueprint that then moves the needle for the operation, as so to the point where the CFO can then say, okay, well, I had this headcount, this operating overhead, I'm now this much automated, I'm doing this on the headcount, this on the volumes, and it's a different set of ratios for the business.
I think that's over the months that you and I have talked about different things as we've built the businesses. I think the distinction I make in the way that we work with clients and focus is versus how you guys think about it and support is, we think about the process of transformation. So we think about it as almost a generic process in its own right that is agnostic of industry, even of type of change. Whereas I think you guys are much more on the content side. So even if that example around the finance function, it's not an area that we would don't have the capability, the deep content knowledge, but actually how you run a transformation at the at the highest level, a transformation management office, the scoping, the leadership, the vision for the whole thing, and actually running that as effectively an organization and a machine in its own right is kind of the process versus the content specialization for us.
Which is what I really like about Muuto. So you guys have designed and fine-tuned the transformation journey itself. And I would never sit here and say that we don't focus on that as well. But actually, NextWave's differentiator is really the practitioner depth in the content and the sector experience, coupled with the acceleration tech, which is the ability to deploy platform and fintech solutions very quickly, so we can build things for the business.
I think in the conversation we have with clients, it's always what have you done in our sector or our industry? And actually, it gives a level of confidence that how that sector works.
Yeah.
But frankly, every transformation is different, but also every transformation is kind of the same as well. So I think the kind of fundamentals of that journey, we've seen and iterated and kind of refined from an approach point of view, and then it's how you tailor it to the context and the specifics of a client or an industry, etc.
So we talked a bit about designing the transformation journey, defining your operating plan or execution plan, if you will, so that you've got guide rails and a plan to work towards, measurable milestones. I talked a little bit about KPIs, and it might be measuring the cost overhead, or it might be the cycle time, or it might be bringing, we have some great examples in the finance space of bringing month end in from, T+15 to maybe T+5 through automation. So there's more efficiency in the workflow. How would you define what does success look like in the transformation space for you, Thomas?
One of the first steps we will take with a client when we're engaged is usually to get a clearer definition of that. So it doesn't have to be measurable bottom line impact. Sometimes it is, enabling a faster speed to market or better quality research and development. It really does depend on what the organization wants to achieve. But some of the bigger pieces we've done, post-merger integration, doing a 10% synergy reduction as a result, which can be overshot, has been overshot, some of the stuff that we've worked on. So there are some big ticket numbers in there. I think the the complexity of how do you get there, not where you're trying to get to, is it's so multi-threaded. So any digital work has a process and a people implication. Any people work has a digital and a processing implication. So it's, the multi-factor transformation means, there's at different levels, very different measures, I think, of what good looks like in terms of execution outcome.
And I think that's why when we look at strategy, we talk about level of ambition, because level of ambition actually has a number attached to it. So it's these overhead ratios, or it's these cycle times, the costs to the organisation. So it's something that you can measure. Now, we talked a bit about the environment we're operating in. We talked a bit about transformation, what that practically means. The overarching world that we're living in, really, the pressures I think all our enterprise clients are feeling, certainly, is to go faster, deliver more, go faster. Sometimes with less, sometimes with appropriate levels of investment. But often it's do more with less. But it's certainly to go more quickly and to de-risk and to be more successful. There are some unhelpful stats floating around the industry about the overall success rate of transformation initiatives, and they don't always succeed. What do you think firms can do to maximize chances of success and to go faster?
There's a few fundamentals that we have seen over the years, regardless of where we are in the cycle. A lot of it is around really acknowledging the interdependencies. So quite often you speak to a transformation leader or a senior business leader, and they say, "Oh, that over there is not in our scope." Might not be in their scope, but it's definitely, it impacts what they're looking at. So I say the interdependencies, managing them is obviously fundamental. As you say, around the investment and the capacity that's dedicated to this kind of change, I think doing a lot of this stuff side of desk sometimes does it a disservice, and that means securing people, the right level of talent, the right level of capacity to do what are fundamentally important things. I think I see people trying to almost nickel and dime it. Again, I think because the effort is seen as a cost, whereas actually if you've got a clear value outcome that you're shooting for, it should almost be an investment with a return attached to it. So it's less a line item and more something that you're going to get a fundamental return from.
Yeah, I think that last point is the one that really resonates with me. It's focusing on the business outcomes, the results. And we see it in the platform space, where sometimes a project is declared complete when the software has been installed, but it really, you're not done until you've got an outcome for the business, and that's about adoption, engagement, measurement. So it's so much more than just a project delivery. I think there's a few other things as well. So I think this is possibly a really interesting part of the conversation, because we want to go quicker and succeed more. I would perhaps add to that we talked about it briefly, starting with a clear vision, mission, and strategy. So you've defined your level of ambition, you've set your target state that you want to get to, and you have a clear operating or a delivery plan to get there with some measurable milestones and KPIs. That's you've sort of you've got your roadmap at that point. I would urge folks to team up with specialists in the different dimensions of that transformation journey. At NextWave, we've got a framework called SPEED. Given that we position as a digital acceleration consultancy, it's cunningly labeled as SPEED, and it stands for strategy, platforms, ecosystems, engagement, and data. And actually, if you think about any transformation journey, fundamentally, those 5 dimensions, those 5 slices of the pizza, are really there in every initiative, because you need to start with that strategic plan. You need to think about the platforms and the technology that you're going to use. We're operating in a connected marketplace, and for every firm now, strategic alliances and the interconnections and network between related processes and functions are fundamental. The engagement part is all about the people, and it's about the ways of working and the culture and the change journey. And this is, I know, where Muuto goes super deep, and the fuel for all of this digital process and efficient workflow is the data. So we like to think about each of those pieces of the journey, and I think if you apply that lens to transformation initiative, firms will they'll know where they're coming up short, right? So they may be very long on engineering capability, but they don't have the expertise of structuring a major transformation and the cultural and ways of working angles on that, which are going to be required for it to be successful. And perhaps maybe they'd call Tom out at that point, or they may be very clear on where they want to get to, but they lack some specialist solutioning capability in certain platform areas, and they might call us for that piece of work. But I think just having that network of expert and specialist input in the right areas of the program is very important.
Yeah, well, I think methodology is a request we often get from clients. I think it feels like almost a safety blanket to hang it onto, hang your change onto, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think they're all fine as models. Usually, they're 9 times out of 10 they're broadly the same, and they'll all work. The bit that I think is often missing is the sort of adherence to it. It's the discipline. It's doing the basics well. Most of the transformation programs we see that are struggling is because they've missed the basics done properly. So it comes back to traditional project and program management, but really tailored to the context of the organisation. And I think context, from our experience, we do quite often do diagnostics on where programs are at and why they're seeing some of the symptoms they are. Quite often it's the lack of awareness or understanding of the context of the organizations in have they got a track record of delivering successful transformation programs. If it's the first one you've done, then you need to tailor it appropriately, and the application of the method, for example. So I think that's probably the biggest predictor we see of success, or the area where we'd focus in on quite early.
Yeah, I think the cultural engagement angles are often under-acknowledged, under-invested in. And we've seen some nice examples at clients in areas that we were engaged on other pieces of work, but we were in areas at our clients where there has been that focus on ways of working, on bringing the culture up to enable an effective transformation at the people level. And there's a phrase that I really like that one of our coaching partners uses, which is beautiful basics, and just getting the basics right, but doing what is sometimes referred to as touchline coaching. So setting off with a direction set and a skills uplift for the team, and forging those communication links, but then having a touch point, a pulse check, a periodic course correction and measurement process, a coaching process throughout. And there was an example in one of our clients where the engagement score from that function was like the bottom of everything. You have about 30 different functions, and it got up to number 2 over a year. But crucially, their engineering delivery cadence and everything else, all the metrics improved as well. So I think that whole area is very interesting and often overlooked.
Yeah, I mean, even just the basics of planning out some kind of roadmap over a period of time, at least it gives you something to shoot at.
Yeah.
What we do quite a lot of, and actually increasingly we're doing, both acquisition and integration, but also divestments. Quite a lot of the transaction-based transformation work that we do, there's a lot of focus on the deal and closing the deal in M&A work. But actually the end-to-end planning around, well, after the deal is closed, what needs to happen, and thinking in, just a broad roadmap to give you some milestones to shoot against. That longer time horizon view, I think, is quite often missing in any kind of transformation, because people think task to task, moment to moment, milestone to milestone, but actually having a broader view. I mean, again, it's just basics done well, I think.
And I think the other things that I would throw into the mix are focus on technology. I think certainly financial services and really all sectors are in a phase of customer-centric, technology-led, getting those platform investments and having that product delivery, service delivery mindset and reality in terms of building effective technology, data-driven processes and digital process is fundamental. It's part of the business strategy process now. It's not, we don't operate in this linear world where the board would set a strategy and then sort of tell the CIO to go build something. It's more about what's possible with enabling technology and feeding that back into setting the business models and the strategy. So we would certainly say smart solutions and technology is one of the ways that you can go faster and succeed. In fact, I would say it's indispensable if you're really sort of just trying to do this by organizational design and moving the jigsaw pieces around you in the current environment, you're missing a trick.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of any client work we've done in the last 5 or 6 years that hasn't got a key component of digital transformation in it as well. Even if we start with organization, there's a big digital component in there. And on the flip side, we've done things that are based around a Workday implementation or an SAP migration. So you start with a digital agenda, but you've got to think about the whole system there as well. So I think it's such a fundamental backbone to any organization now around how they deliver processes, how they're enabled through technology. And we haven't got into the AI thing yet, but
I think it's that's a couple of minutes away, I think. And rapid agile deliveries. So many of us who've grown up in the projects and transformation space have sort of been very familiar with monolithic waterfall delivery programs. So important in the current environment to demonstrate success early and then be able to build on that. And we've had one or two really nice examples in the work that we've been doing with clients over the last couple of years. And there's one in particular where it was only a very small implementation, but it was a tangible piece of controls work which we built for a banking client using data analytics platform technology that took a process that used to take 4 weeks down to one that ran in about 5 minutes. That was a solution was developed and delivered in 6 weeks, and the client was so sort of pleased and bowled over with the ability to say, we've delivered that, it's moved the needle, I can now report to regulator in 5 minutes. I can even use those numbers to give back to the trading desk and they can make some decisions on them because they're accurate in real time. They're not 4 weeks after the fact. That solution was then taken out as a case study across the organization. And what you find is you then uncover a backlog of similar use cases and more ambition from across the organization. And you get sort of snowball effect and momentum behind that solutioning approach. And we've seen that starts small and then build incrementally across the organization, way more effective than setting out a big set of future KPIs, a year or two from now, and then you may or may not measure the success when we get to that point. I just don't think we're operating in that world anymore.
Yeah, it goes back to, moving stuff as close to the front line where the work gets done as possible. I think that's where they know where the problems are. They probably know where the solutions are. And I think depending on how you architect a big program of change, you can enable quite a lot of that if you give people the latitude. I think demonstrating progress, just giving people the feeling of moving forward, I think is important as well as delivering the results. So I think agility, and we hear it all the time with different clients, capital A, small a, different types of agility, that can be incorporated into big complex programs in many different ways, I think. So, you could have digital streams, real estate streams, legal entity streams that, they all come in together. And methodology, I think, is less important than the ability to, mobilize and start delivering outcomes pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah. So. And what do you think firms should think about in terms of consulting partners who to team up with?
Increasingly, we're seeing demand around like an ecosystem of probably smaller, more specialist organizations. We would say that, wouldn't we? But I do think there is a move away from kind of big monolithic delivery partners to kind of a selection of partners who in some ways probably know the organization and its context more intimately, I think, which has a big bearing on outcomes, as I said earlier. So I see a lot more of that.
And as you said, Tomo, we would say that. I mean, we are NextWave's unashamedly and consciously a challenger consultancy to the big brand consultancies, although we're on a different scale, a different point in our journey. But we would absolutely say that. I think, but we are seeing this in the sector. We're seeing a shift towards we want more practitioner in the mix. We want smarter solutions on the latest component technologies. We want a lower price point. We want smaller agile teams, not large pyramid teams. So all of those things, but there's also a place for scale and experience and brand strength, and because that obviously has a play in the boardroom and the ability to secure budget. So I think something else you said there that's really important is it is an ecosystem. So NextWave plays very, very well with all the big brand consultancies. Actually, we straightforwardly compete with from time to time, but we often find ourselves in the mix. We've got probably 40% of our clients we're in teams with a recognizable consultancy brand where either we're leading or it's a hybrid team structure, and the other firm is leading. And I think it's very important to be able to play well with the rest of the network.
I don't think collaboration between different suppliers is optional anymore. I think it's expected by clients. So I think that mindset of if there's value in it for the client, then whoever the supplier is, whoever the consulting partners are, they should all be working together, I think, to move that. And it's a different way of working, but I think there's some interesting stuff from Reid Hoffman I saw a couple of days ago, that he thinks, half the world's going to be working as sort of freelancers and, small specialist shops over the next decade. So I think that just kind of shows people are going to have to collaborate, bring best in class, bring best technologies, bring best people, and just coalesce around a client value story, a client challenge. I think it's quite an exciting time, but it's a very kind of you've got to be pretty adaptable to the needs of clients at the moment. But I think that's part of the fun of it at the moment.
Yeah. Well, we started talking about West Coast innovators and future world of work. So we got 32 minutes, I think, into a conversation without mentioning AI. But now's the moment. So this has captured the world, certainly captured our sector, that we've got clients who, apart from doing mandatory regulatory work, it appears that almost the only other thing they're doing is working out how to use AI to advantage, and maybe to leapfrog some of the things they would otherwise be doing to their infrastructure and their environments. Can we get ahead by not cleaning up the data swamp, and maybe using AI to get us where we need to be? I think the jury's out on that last one, but AI, I mean, how do you see this playing into the world of enterprise transformation?
Well, that's kind of two strands for us, I think, mainly. The first one is it's going to fundamentally change over a period of time, the needs of the workforce, the skills demanded of a workforce. And, there's going to be an element of reskilling, relearning, but how organizations adapt to that in the way they're structured, the way they're led, the way people are incentivized, the complexity that comes around shifting a workforce over a period of time from a current state to a fundamentally transformed and enabled state with AI. It's going to be fairly revolutionary. Who knows how that looks or how quickly it's going to go, but it's going to be, I think, pretty complicated. And I think on the flip side, we're an organization trying to use AI for what we do as well. And I think that's also something that my team are sick of hearing me bang on about this. And I'm literally, every 5 minutes I'm sending a link to something else. But we've actually commissioned a piece of research with the London School of Economics around this, because we think around the organization, the design of organizations, both how they need to be designed to enable, this new way of working, and the way you do organization design enabled by AI is something different. So we have a piece of bespoke software that we use in our org design work, and we've actually already built, generative AI into that to increase the speed, give a breadth of options, and actually work with clients on some of that. So we're starting to see use cases. We're adopting it, but also in our client areas, there's a lot of experimentation. There's a lot of don't know yet. But I think it will be also built into the the more traditional digital platforms as well. We're seeing it in some of the ERP systems, different ways of working. But fascinating. It's an interesting time to be in the sector.
I love that you've already built tooling that you're using in your transformation consulting delivery. And there is so much experimentation going on across the sector. For us, I see effective AI as AI plus automation. So AI is the brain and automation is the body. You need agency. You need to get things done. It's what, and I love the phrase, so credit to Gartner, they seem to be calling this useful AI, which is AI that's actually in your workflow. So it's not just a widget that can generate some marketing copy. It's sort of, how does that fit into the daily workflow in a way that it's genuinely adding value. And I think we're going to see that come. So our AI working group have 300 or 400 use cases across FS, and the machine learning elements of this have been out there for a long time. So you can predict default on loans, but if you can do that on a loan, you could do it on a credit card, you could do it on a mortgage, and so forth. And there's models for that. Many institutions experimenting with this. The generative bit of actually being able to generate text, image, computer vision, and the other pieces coming into the frame just really has taken everything up a level. So our client base are all experimenting with large language models and more recently with small language models. And we're coupling AI with the automation piece. And the NextWave team are, I wouldn't say we're on the bleeding edge, but we're absolutely in that first cohort. We've built things like automated collateral processing for clients where the AI is triaging the collateral calls at the top of a 20-step manual process. Well, it's no longer manual because we've done the interpretation and the decomposition of and categorization piece right at the top using AI, but then use automation analytics tech to take a 20-step manual process into an automated flow. And it's another one of those ones that used to take a week or two to run and now runs in a couple of hours. And that's AI plus agency, but and it's only a small use case that I just described, but it has transformed that piece of the operation. And I think once you start to scale that out, it's going to get very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, understandably, there's a kind of a normal distribution of adoption at the moment, I think.
Yeah.
But I did read some research on this week that, the more broad the population is in an organization that's experimenting and trying things, the better, because things will cut through and then they'll be useful. In some clients that we're speaking to at the moment, there's a little bit of a tendency in non-technical or non-digitally orientated, traditional businesses to leave it with technical people in a technical back room, and then it doesn't really see the light of day and become useful. So I think there's something about bringing it out into the workforce proper and giving them a chance to experiment. Comes with a balance of risk and insecurity and things like that. So I think that's a real consideration. But also, again, in some research this week, that if for every dollar spent on AI technology, you should be spending $3 to $5 on the people side of that as well because of the implications. So even just the scale of the effort that's involved in that over the next period is going to be, again, fascinating to see how it plays out. But it'll be quick, it'll be short cycle times, and it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and the sectors at very different stages, and even within single firms, depends who you talk to. So we had one of the larger banks, and we ran a round table on this a few weeks ago. One of the larger banks, whose engineering lead said, "Well, yeah, we're on the front foot. We've spread all the models. We've been doing this for a long time. We know exactly how it all works. So we don't see that we need to do a lot of education upskill, but their business was at the other end of the table." And we're like, absolutely, we need to know, the art of the possible here, and how do we weave this into our strategy? And there's a massive education requirement required across the business, and that was all within one institution. But then we also had firms who said we're leading, and we've already rolled this out. We've got client advisory chatbots that are out there, and we're doing predictive models now, and we're going to put customer operations, customer service onto AI agents, and then other firms who said we're just watching. We haven't got to start yet. But the research analysts are generally saying that 2025, 26, there'll be a bit of an inflection point where you're either a firm with AI or a firm without. And if you're without, you're going to struggle to catch up because, to your point, that experimentation, fail fast, recalibrate, that journey is an 18-month plus journey. So if you're not investing now in what works, what doesn't, your data foundations, how does this all pull together? How do I build knowledge sets? How do I use them in these new models? It's going to be very difficult to close the gap against the firms that have.
Yeah, I immediately go to my experience with sort of managing change in some of these big organizations, and that's both leadership alignment around these things, but also kind of workforce changes. I think we've got a lot of organizations, probably sectors as well, where people will push back against it because the fear of the unknown and the implications, the impacts of it. There'll be people, I think, sandbagging some of this stuff for a period longer before they realize it's kind of become ubiquitous in the way they work around all of the platforms they use. I think that'll take a while, but I think you'll see firms lead in and embrace it, and geek out on this sort of stuff all the time.
Oh, yeah.
But I think there'll be parts of our client organizations where actually it's people are actively avoiding it. I think for fear of the implications on the day to day.
Yeah, I mean, there's various schools of thought which range from the Terminator scenario through to more benign outcomes. But there is a school of thought that if you can do things more effectively, more quickly using AI and make bigger profits and be more efficient, surely you're just going to want to do more of it, in which case your business is going to expand. So this is augmented humanity, but it's not folks who are going to be out of a job. It's just you're going to be able to go further and travel faster and do more. So actually we're all going to be more productive, and there's going to be more employment rather than less. So it's an interesting twist on that, on the negative scenarios.
No, it hurts the head when you go into the kind of wider, economic and societal implications. But and interesting time to be alive for sure.
Yeah, and there's lots of cool things you can do with it, as we're seeing. Anyway, look, we could go down that rabbit hole for the next half an hour, and we don't have half an hour. We probably have 2 or 3 minutes to wrap up the conversation. So super interesting, just comparing notes on all of this and sort of starting with what is transformation in the new environment, and how might we measure that, and how do we set ourselves up to succeed, and then perhaps the accelerators that come from AI and technology, sort of touching on a few points there. What would you say would be your takeaways? So navigating the new transformation environment, that's what we're here to talk about. Perhaps if you've got this far in the session, and you're wondering what the 3 things perhaps would be to take away, well, what would be yours?
I mean, I think there's a tendency, personally, I've got it, but also I see it in some client organizations as well, to go after shiny and interesting things. And I don't just mean, AI of the moment. I mean, any kind of project or agenda that I think is interesting to a business, but is there value attached to it? Or why are you doing it? Why are you setting out on some kind of change journey? So I think, my biggest takeaway from this conversation, we've both kind of said it several times, is, how are you going to prove success? What is the, the outcome that you're going for? And everything really should be around, how do you enable and accelerate towards that value realization? So how do you do it more predictably, less impact on the day-to-day, less messiness, I think, in what is, a messy process. So I think it's about that kind of speed to value. But with predictability, I think there's much as you can get. So it's learning from the experiences of others.
I'd say start with a clear vision, mission, and strategy. Look to team up with specialists where it's clear that you need to fill some gaps and perhaps come up to level, or maybe you want to partner up with someone to co-deliver until you're self-sufficient, but look to leverage the network and your connections so that you are strong in all 5 of those speed dimensions, because I would always say you've got to be strong in all 5, and if you leave the data out, or you leave the engagement of the people out, it doesn't matter how good you are on the platforms and the ecosystem, for example, it's not going to work. So focus on the full 360 degrees. Choose your partners carefully, start with a clear goal in mind, and then move fast. Be agile, move fast, and learn from the journey.
Yeah, I think the learning thing's important. I talk to my kids about this all the time, is don't learn from my mistakes, not their mistakes. And I think, the work we do with clients as well, it's, we've got a team and people who've worked on many of these kind of programs in the past. So I think we've had the opportunity to make controlled mistakes. So I think you kind of bring that learning into what we do as well.
Yeah. So if any of the folks out there who found this interesting and want to know more about Tomo and more about Muuto, where do they go?
So we are on LinkedIn, so Muuto Consulting on LinkedIn, also muuto.co.uk for the webpage.
Yeah, very good. And you can find me equally on LinkedIn, nextwave.com, NextWave, and would be very happy to talk to anyone who wants to dig in any of the topics we've been talking about today. Thanks, Tomo.
Thanks, Tony.